So thank you very much for attending our webinar today. Do it better than Netflix, content personalization and discovery. I hope that this session proves to be educational and gives you information to deliver and develop a better OTT strategy for your business. So just going into who's speaking today, there's myself, Saqib Mirza. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Vodworks. But sitting with me today is my learned and trusted friend, Tom Dvorak from XroadMedia, and he's the Chief Commercial Officer there.
Good morning, everybody.
So just having a quick look at our agenda for the day, we'll start off quickly with some introductions on both Vodworks and XroadMedia. And then we'll spend a little bit of time, Tom will spend a little bit of time discussing the role of content personalization discovery and giving you a bit more information about the landscape. And then we'll move into some conversations about where are the core benefits with applying this technology to your strategy. After that, we'll move into the most fun part of the webinar, where we'll show some example implementations in demo environment as well as a live environment. And then Tom will walk us through some case studies where you can actually see the tangible benefits. Following on from that, we'll move on to the conclusion, where we'll summarize some of the points, and then we'll go into a Q&A session. So just a quick introduction on Vodworks. We're essentially a international software development house at core, and we concentrate and focus on developing technology solutions for the global media market. We have a special expertise in the area of OTT, where we deploy end-to-end systems as well as various components within this industry. In terms of our international locations, we are based in London, Riyadh, and Lahore, but we are opening offices in Dubai, Singapore, and Montreal soon. So we really do have that global coverage. On the tin, we are an established end-to-end OTT systems integrator, and we're currently servicing clients in North America, Europe, Africa, Middle East, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. So we're pretty well covered in terms of where we can support our customers. Now, we mainly support them in two main ways, which is Vidscape and the TV apps. Vidscape itself it's a powerful OTT data management platform that we've developed specifically for this market. And it really harnesses the power of the data that you collect during the operation of your service, and it helps you to deliver better monetization, better analytics, and drive better consumer experiences. And following on from that, we also, and this is traditionally where Vodworks actually came from, is the TV apps. We actually started in TV apps, where we developed multi-screen solutions for different screens that includes mobile, web, tablet, and set-top box. And we essentially have now an independent set of apps that can work with various platforms, various OTT platforms, as well as organically within the Vidscape hemisphere. So finally, just talking about partnerships, one of the core areas of Vodworks is that we do believe that partnerships is a very, very big part of delivering the best possible solutions. So this is another reason why myself and Tom decided that we would present combined solutions today and more knowledge to the industry, because we do think that we work better together. So now, just coming up to that final slide, which we went a little bit prematurely, you can see that we have a good cross-section. So this is just a sample of our clients, but we have a very good cross-section of the clients that we service. We work with technology companies, we work with TV companies, telcos, as well as independent studios and content owners. So we do have a variety of solutions for different parts of the market. Okay, so I'm just going to pass now over to Tom, who will take over and give you more of an intro on XroadMedia, and then start the actual core of the presentation.
Okay, also good morning from my side, and thank you very much for joining this webinar today. I hope you will get some interesting facts out of it. Just as a brief introduction, as I think not everybody of you might know XroadMedia and what XroadMedia does. XroadMedia is a company, and we have developed the latest generation of content discovery and recommendation solution, which we market under the brand Ncanto. And Ncanto has been optimized for cloud deployments, so we are fully deployable in any private or public cloud, which also requires a minimum effort from our customers to use and operate our solution in their environment. And we have shown with our customer deployments that also the return on investment of our solution is extremely quick compared to other solutions, so that you can recoup your money actually within just a few months of using our solution by opening up new revenue streams, but also strengthening your existing ones. From a company perspective, we are headquartered in Europe, so in Austria, Vienna, and with the second office here in London. And the company was founded by 4 industry experts, so 3 fellow colleagues of mine and myself. And we have more than 15 years of experience in the area of content discovery, content recommendation, but also content navigation. And as I mentioned before, we have developed, meanwhile, the 3rd generation of content discovery solutions, and we're few releases in there already with Ncanto. And Ncanto is based, albeit we're a quite new company, on more than 10 years of research and predominantly consumer and market research done through our times at Philips, but also at XroadMedia, and also more than 5 years of business-to-business customer deployments, which we focus on with our Ncanto solution. And we work today with content and service providers, particularly in the video and digital media industries. We work with technology providers like our partners of Vodworks here, where we have pre-integrated our technology, and we complement a much larger end-to-end solution with our content discovery and recommendation part. And we also work with connected device manufacturers in Europe and other regions where we personalize set-top boxes and also PVRs with Ncanto. And what we deliver as a company through our Ncanto solution is basically 3 key services. It's all about metadata handling and enhancement. So we can take in the metadata of our customers, and we can validate and analyze it, and then also enrich it for our customers to make sure that they have at the end of the exercise one consistent set and enhanced set of metadata. We have a full-blown content discovery and recommendation solution, which serves from simple search strings up to traditional recommendation engines and traditional recommendation algorithms, up to a complete spectrum of new breed personalization and content discovery tools, for example, social integration and so on. And finally, being a content discovery solution, we also offer analytical and statistical information to our customers to better understand the users they have, but also the content they have in their portfolio and the content they're about to acquire for their service. Okay, so what do we deliver and how do we set ourselves apart from competition? And this is the last slide where I would like to tell you a little bit more about us, and then I will dive into the topic as such. So what we deliver is a real-time content discovery solution, which is highly scalable and highly performing with respect to recommendation accuracy, and also with respect to scalability for our customers. So we can start off with small trials, just a few users, just a few assets, up to multi-million users and asset deployments in the cloud. We have developed our solution with a single standard-based API, and this means it reduces the complexity and resources required from our customers dramatically to deploy solutions like recommendations. For those who might have experiences with recommendations so far, you might find it a little bit cumbersome and also problematic to deploy the solutions with your platform, and you might also find it cost expensive as well. And finally, what we have also done when we have developed our solution is we wanted to reduce the operational costs for our customers. This is one of the main reasons why we went into the cloud, but also why we have restructured the architecture of our solution. and why we have also included a business management function, which basically lets you interact, if you would want to, with our engine in any shape or form to tune the results we deliver to consumers according to your business requirements, and that you can blend your business rules into the customers or the user's tastes. Okay, so let us talk about what does content personalization and discovery can do for you. So I think in a nutshell, just to summarize it, we believe that personalization and content discovery can turn your subscribers or your users into real consumers, so that they watch more of the content you provide to them, that they extract the maximum value out of the service you supply to them, and that they also buy more content off you. Very often what I hear in discussions with customers and potential clients is, why do I actually need content discovery today? And what we see in the market is that there's a certain tug of war between the consumer and the service provider. So as you know, probably the consumer has the demand from our customers to receive all the content he can. He wants to watch this content everywhere, so that's why multi-screen solutions pop up everywhere now. With more devices, with more content and content sources coming in, the desire for an easy-to-use service becomes bigger as well. And at the end of the day, consumers are, particularly in front of the TV, lazy people, so they want to have a one-stop shop and do not want to flip between applications to find the content they're interested in. On the service provider side, on the other hand, to serve all these requirements, they still need to bear in mind, obviously, that they need to make some profit out of this service. Otherwise, they're not going to be around long. And that they can earn some profit, they need to make sure that they have any media they can implement also in their services, and that it can be found easily by the consumer, and that the user stays happy with the service as long as it can. And we believe personalization exactly provides this capability to keep the requirements from the service providers and the consumers in balance, and to make sure that the consumers can extract the maximum value out of the service, and the service provider still makes a profit and has happy customers, basically. So in the market, what we can see today is, obviously there are a lot of methodologies around which serve parts of search, content recommendation, content discovery. And you can see all of the different methodologies here on the slide. So it starts off with searching and browsing, which is very popular, particularly on lean forward mediums, for example, the web. And on television, it's more the browsing experience, which helps you to find some content. But we also see more editorial guidance coming into the game, which started off with paper program guides many, many years ago, and now also enters the digital space, but also enters now the service provider services. And on the other side, you have your friends, typically on the water cooler effect, where you have when you have people you trust with their interest, then you're also very, very likely to follow the requirements or the recommendations they make. And social media obviously is one medium which can bring you those friends, at least virtually, onto your couch as well, where you need them when you're sitting in front of your television set. So social media becomes a more important part in this equation as well. And all of this, in our opinion, also wraps up then into the ultimate way of providing recommendation, which is profiling. So based on the information you provide to the service, but also information the service receives from you through different input mechanisms, then open up profiling, and then also the service can make some suggestions on how and what you might be interested in watching.
So just quickly to step in, we seem to have a question that's come in. So before we move into the next section, maybe we can ask this question. Tom, where, in your opinion, is the biggest room for improvement on the Netflix service? So I guess you're the expert, so you're probably the best person to answer this question from at least from a content personalization perspective. Because in the market, from our perspective, Netflix is seen as the typical one. I mean, it's even on the name of the webinar. They're the pinnacle of the industry. So where do you think, in this subject area, do you think there is room for improvement with Netflix?
Yeah, I think I will discuss this a little bit more in detail later on in the presentation, but I think Netflix does a great job in taking the consumer on a journey, to understand what you're looking for and what you're interested in. I think what Netflix does not do very, very well is to bring these recommendations and bring this profiling information onto the screen. So it's very, very hard for people to find content they're really interested in. You see a lot of recommendations of content you have seen already. You see a lot of endless zapping cycles, so you can go through lists all day long if you would want to. So I think the ease of use is lacking a little bit on Netflix as well. And what I see most critical with Netflix, at least for me being a user of Netflix, is that the feedback you provide to Netflix is not considered straight away in the service. So if you, for example, watch a movie and you like a movie at the end of the show, it still takes some time for the engine of Netflix to bear that in mind and then also provide the results which are also reflecting the interactions you've just made a few seconds or maybe a few minutes before. This is also why, for example, we have decided to go the extra mile with our solution to provide a 100% real-time engine, so that the user immediately sees an effect when he does an interaction. And we see this very, very important, particularly on lean-back medium, where interactions are very rare and people don't bother to make too many interactions because it's too cumbersome for them with a remote control or something like. So it's even more important that you capture the user's preferences very quickly, just with a few interactions, and then also process them in real time.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, so going back to content discovery and recommendations, what have we seen? And Saqib, feel free to jump in at any point in time here. What we have seen as the current challenges today in rolling out recommendations with customers is that very, very often the perception of our customers is that personalization is a very expensive tool to have.
Yeah, that's actually our experience. So, I mean, some of these points actually came from me. But yeah, no, I would agree. It seems to be something that people see as a very expensive way to innovate on OTT.
And I think that's partly true with respect to traditional recommendation engines, because as I mentioned before, I mean, we have also done a couple of iterations when we were Philips, and we also came across customers, who mentioned to us, well, we would love to work with you, but we don't have this time, the money, and the resources to spend on you at the moment because we need to bring out a service. So that's exactly why we have redeveloped our software from scratch, being XroadMedia, to exactly make sure that it's not necessarily, to put hundreds and thousands of dollars into a slot machine before you can start actually making recommendations. So I think new tools, new recommendation solutions are much more agile in this respect. And I think the money game is not that much of an issue any longer, as far as we are concerned, at least. But it still is one of the reasons, and I mean the perception here rather than the fact, that it is moved, to the phase 2 and 3 of service deployments today, still.
So I know you're probably going to cover some of this later on in the presentation, but let me just get a quick question in now. Why, in your opinion, should recommendations be part of a phase 1 deployment?
Well, I think particularly new deployments, they very often have the big advantage that you can start sort of greenfield. So you don't have to take, for example, a brand with you. You don't have to take, let's say, a legacy user interface with you. So you can start with a completely fresh look and feel. And I think it's very, very important and sometimes even vital to include certain content discovery use cases in the user interface from day one. because when you introduce then more advanced functionalities, you can do it in a more smooth and not so much disruptive way.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side as well, you can use also, let's say, traditional and low advanced recommendation parts in your user interface straight away. And then when you would like to enhance those functionalities, then you can do this in a more subtle and a more easy way. So, I mean, other challenge, which I think we can also combine a little bit in the discussion, is that very often what we see in discussing with clients is that sometimes the UI look and feel is more important to them than, for example, the overall user experience. And sometimes I think UI and user experience are also mixed up in terminology. So sometimes, you know, we believe the user experience is more the broader sense that you think about how people navigate in your user interface and how to make it as easy as possible for them to discover what they're interested in. And then, of course, supported by a, you know, nice looking and sleek and smooth transforming user interface.
So just from, you know, Vodworks' perspective, my perspective, you know, in this industry, what I have seen is that people will allocate a certain amount of budget to developing out a very expensive UI versus implementing something which is actually quite core to the whole experience of a subscriber or consumer, which is the actual access to content and getting the most relevant content. But it's interesting, some of your points, because I actually do agree with you in that sense that, you know, engaging user experiences and spending a lot of money on UIs and navigation, when you have the access to tools which are constantly learning, such as you know, content personalization technology, I find it quite interesting that the budget is still allocated in that direction, when potentially there are tools like this which can, you know, really level the playing field, particularly for the smaller operators.
Yeah, yeah, and I think also, you know, if you have a sleek working user interface, you also can afford to have a, let's say, maybe second-class looking one, because you know, sometimes that's also what we have seen with Netflix. I mean, the user interface now I think is really shiny and really bright, but it started off completely differently, and they still were the #1 in this area because of the use of the service in the first case. And that's also why they spend a lot of time in exploring and researching what the user does on their platform. And I think this also ties in with the last point here on the slide, which is basically that also content discovery and recommendation can provide you with an answer to the quest of our customers to understand what the users do in their platform. So what kind of content do they consume? How much time do they spend on certain areas, and why do they spend it there? So obviously platforms have basic functionalities within, like, you know, Bitscape has it as well. You have your own analytics and your own platforms, but we can now combine this also with those statistics analytics coming from content discovery recommendation. And then I think you have quite a powerful set of analytics, and you don't need to implement heavy and complex analytics software, which obviously provide even more insights, but that's sometimes, you know, not necessary for particular greenfield deployments where you would like to get the basics right and then, you know, move on into the more detailed stage. And so what we see in the market, what are the biggest expectations in the market? And I think there are 4 key expectations, and I will also come back to that a little bit later when I talk about some use cases and implementations of our solution. But you know, our customers, they request a lot that users engage much more with the service. So that also user satisfaction rates go up, and that they spend more time in the service and don't look elsewhere when they're looking for content they're interested in. And then on the bottom line, basically, you know, it's all about revenues and ARPU, obviously. So increase existing revenues is at the moment the highest expectation, because that's also the reason why content discovery and recommendation is one of the main tools for VOD platforms, because you know, you have to get more transactions done, you have to get more subscribers signed up to, but also on the ARPU side for pay TV providers, that they can make sure that users also move on from one lower subscription package into a higher one, and that they can increase ARPU through to ease of use, content discovery, and content recommendation. So what do we see now from a recommendation platform perspective being the opportunities for our customers? And on the next slide, I will talk a little bit about how these opportunities can turn out in numbers from some of our deployments. But I think personalization definitely provides you with the possibility to develop and also deliver a genuinely better user experience, and so to keep more competitive in an already saturated market. So we see this particularly also with newcomers in the VOD space, Netflix challengers, but also OTT service providers, that they try to differentiate themselves quite a lot with content discovery and recommendation. Furthermore, it also adds some more control for you over your costs, so you can reduce some overhead costs, for example, for content licensing, when you understand what type of content your audience is looking for, basically. And you can also increase the economy of scale for video infrastructure better if you use a personalized service in a more effective way. And it also provides with the possibility to become actually the required one-stop shop and deliver everything your audience asks for and even more. And that's mainly driven by the fact that you can better understand your audience and the preferences through to tools like content discovery and recommendation. But what we should not forget is that at the end of the day, it's a service provider's game, and at least for us, because these are our main customers. And our key goal is to make our customers more successful, and also to make them happier by making more revenues at the end of the day. And what we see is, with modern content discovery and recommendation solutions, service providers can align their business requirements with the goals and the tastes of the users themselves. So you can really blend your business goals into the user tastes as quickly as possible, which drives basically also the success rate for customers. And finally, with personalization, also new revenue streams are opened up. It starts now with obviously more VOD services in pay TV environments. Targeted advertisement is coming slowly, very, very slowly, but I think it's coming in the next years as well.
Do you think that's because there is a lack of stock, or because there's a lack of technology to promote targeted advertising?
I think it's a bit of both. I think the technologies are around for targeted advertisement. There are some quite innovative solutions, and also, for example, Ncanto can act as a decision engine for campaign management tools. But I think it's more on the advertisement asset side, basically, or the campaign side, which is still very much in the demographic way of thinking rather than a personalized way. They're still in a kind of a mass distribution mode rather than a targeted mode. Yeah. Okay, so before we go into our demos, just maybe to prove a few of the points made before about the opportunities. So with obviously a lot of help of our customers and also our partners, we have implemented our solution in different types of services and environments. And what we've seen is, for example, by implementing advanced content discovery tools into set-top boxes and PVRs, that we were able to increase the TV watching time by about 120 minutes per week, which is roughly 20% per household, 20% more per household, mainly driven by personalization and content discovery. By implementing recommendation and content discovery into existing IPTV services, we were also able to substantially increase subscriber numbers and the usage of subscribers in the service. So, for example, with one of our services with the telco in Eastern Europe. We were able to double their subscriber bases using recommendation just within a few weeks of being implemented there. But also on websites where, again, coming back to the advertisement question from Sakib before, where advertisement and also targeted advertisement, meanwhile, is very, very important to make revenues out of web pages. We have done this with a couple of websites where we were able to increase the click rates on those websites by a factor of 10, which basically also means a similar increase of ad revenues for them, given the impressions they have on the websites.
I believe the CPCs for targeted advertising are also higher, if I'm not mistaken.
That is true. That is true. Yes, correct. And more traditional implementations like IPTV environments or in general pay TV environments. What we've done is, for example, implementing into a VOD rate, we increased buy rates by 25%, and that was mainly by replacing an existing solution. So there was already quite a high transaction based on an existing recommendation solution. And for overall services, we were also able to increase ARPU by more than 10%, or sorry, more than 9%, roughly 10%, by combining content discovery and content recommendation use cases scattered into screens, which I think would be very nice to also see now how it can look like on user interfaces when we look into some of our demos here.
Just before we carry on, so the question came in. You talk about user experience being content personalization recommendation. This is a back-end solution. How do you influence the UK and then later corrected to UX? So I think you answered some of those points, but I mean, is there anything else that you would like to add potentially to fulfill that question? Yeah,
and Will, thanks for the question. It's actually a very, very often asked question. I mean, obviously, we are a back-end solution, so a recommendation solution. We don't have any aspirations with respect to the user interface, so we don't have any brand aspirations or something like that. However, we believe that if you don't have the right front end, the best back end doesn't help. So you need to think, you don't need to think what you would like to sell to the user, but you need to think how to sell it to the user. So what we do is we can provide consultancy about do's and don'ts in the user interface, or we can provide some best practices of use cases for different implementations, also how to harness best the different capabilities of the different platforms. So what to put into, for example, a lean back environment on a set-top box or a TV compared to use cases you should use on a tablet or a mobile phone, and also differences in how to make recommendations here or there. So it's more a consulting game for us. So at the end of the day, the user interface is, our customers' gateway to the user, and it's their brand recognition at stake. So it's their decision at the end of the day, but we can accompany them in, the integration phase and give them some consultancy there.
Okay, I just want to add one point because I'm not sure if Will was with us a little bit earlier, but we talked about how recommendations. So from a pure technology perspective, I think this technology, what it does in terms of user experience is it concentrates on the most important asset within an OTT service or a TV service, which is the content itself. It's concentrating on delivering the content to the user as opposed to trying to make everything around the content look pretty, which is, I think, one of the points we covered earlier on. So what we want to do is show you some examples of some implementation. So Vidscape, the backend platform, as well as our off-the-shelf apps, are actually pre-integrated with Ncanto and the technology. So I just want to show a few sample implementations. So what you see on the screen at the moment is our Vidscape application running in an emulator, an Android emulator. And what you see on screen is a very typical tiled interface of showing content. At the top of the screen, you can see different groups of content: new releases, action, war. But right underneath, what you'll see is some various filters. So you'll see that you've got latest, popular, and recommended. So latest is obviously content that's last been published, the last content published. Popular is based on a collaborative decision of what content is being watched the most at the moment. But what happens is when we click recommended, our system makes a call to Ncanto to share what content is currently available on the screen and who is the user who is actually logged in and making this request. And what the system does is it automatically orders the content from most recommended to least recommended. But there is one other aspect as well. You'll notice there is now less content on the screen. So from the Ncanto Business Manager, you are also able to set kind of limitations on strictness on how sensitive the scores are. So over a certain score, only that content will show. So what this focuses on is making sure that the content delivered to the user is only the most relevant content. So what I'd like to do is just move on to another example. This is what we call essentially the recommended home screen. So I'm just going to also show you quickly an example of our backend system. So if I go to the layout management functionality of our system, the menu management in this setting, what you'll notice, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but just roughly in the middle of the screen, you can see this recommended content and groups. So this is essentially how you manage what appears on the screens within your OTT service. And this toggle allows you to say that I want the home screen for the user to be recommended, not necessarily just in terms of content, but also the groups of content. And if you look a little bit further below, you'll see a list of groups. And these groups in our system are based on any criteria. It can be based on metadata, genres, pricing, and various other, and you can combine these rules to come up with very dynamic groups. But what you'll also see the list of groups featured adventure, comedy, thriller. And within that, you have these on-off toggles. And these toggles allow you to say, as an operator, I want to prefix certain groups. So no matter whether the groups on the homepage are recommended or not, still the groups that I want to show still appear. So at the moment, you see that featured is there, and you've got these other ones. So if I go back to the app, what you'll see is that exact same list: adventure, comedy, thriller, and Brad Pitt, which is a category based on an actor. And I'm just going to quickly log in as a user. Nice simple passwords. So this user we have prescribed to be a female in their 40s and watches daytime television. So we actually invited some people to create actual profiles based on liking and disliking content. And now what you'll see is that the groups of content on the home screen have now all changed. And it's completely based on this user and what is what's recommended to them. But even within the group itself, you will see that the posters themselves, the content itself is also recommended. So from the left, where the user's natural starting position is, they're seeing the most relevant content. And as they scroll to the right, they will see less and less recommended content. And I think we had a discussion a little bit earlier on about hybrid. So what we've essentially allowed is operators within this tool, what I showed you in the back end, is to create a hybrid where they can maintain a very recommended and personalized home screen, but a little bit similar to Netflix, but they can also push certain types of content of their own if they have certain rules that they have to follow, etc.
Yeah, and actually even a combination of that. So you can also have, for example, an editorial recommendation row here, if you like, but you can also then run those editorial recommendations through the profiles of the user. And then you have the kind of personal recommendations based on editorial recommendations, if you like. But I would like to use also here the opportunity of the screen to answer Eva's question, who basically asked, when we're real time, how can we create more relevant lean back experience? So Eva, what we do is basically we identify in a lean back environment, obviously not only explicit information from the user, like a rating, for example, of content, but we also use implicit information which is provided to us by the platform, for example, by Vidscape. If somebody clicks, for example, on a poster here, or if somebody watches the movie to learn about this experience, and then we take every single feedback from the platform in consideration straight away. And one of the examples where you can see this immediately is when Saqib now presses the info button, is you will see an explanation why this particular asset has been recommended to you. And that's a very, very detailed explanation, and this is exactly what we learn from these kind of interactions of the user. And again, they can be explicit by, for example, the like and the dislike button on the middle of the screen here, but they can also be implicit just by the fact that you're watching on the detail page, or by the fact that you have watched the content full time, or maybe just 5% of it, or you bought it, or something alike. And then everything contributes to additional use cases, like, for example, where we can add a score, where we can show the user how much he might like this particular content. I'll show you that in a second, but also, for example, for the explanation.
Okay. But I mean, this message as well that you see, which is appearing and disappearing too quickly for my liking, is you can actually change the messaging. Is that right?
Yeah. Okay. So you can decide how many explanations you would like to have, how deep you would like to go, how accessible this information is for the user. You can also ask him to interact if you're on a tablet, for example. Yeah. So you can basically decide through the management tool in the background by us. So you don't have to decide it straight away through the client integration. So you can start off with maybe just one layer of explanation, and then you say it's not good enough, you can then add a second or a third layer. As long as you have the real estate in the user interface, that's no problem. You don't have to reintegrate. Basically. Okay.
Well, at the moment, we're actually just using the single API for everything, and I'm about to move on to the final part of my implementation use cases. And we're using that same API, so that information that we're showing is actually coming directly from Ncanto. So the final implementation example is that of a linear broadcast environment. So from our perspective, a typical user, when he goes to the EPG, he's always flooded with a large amount of content. And I think we've got some customers on this, so they'll probably be interested in seeing this as well. Obviously, when a user is flooded with content, it makes it very difficult to make decisions on what they want to watch in a linear broadcast environment. So what we've integrated using the same API from Ncanto is show recommended. And what you'll notice is now some of the content on screen has been starred. And what this essentially shows the user is only content, for example, that is most recommended to them based on their preferences and based on the information that's been collected by Ncanto. And the sensitivity of this as well can be managed directly in Ncanto's business manager, but the user also, and we're looking at some use cases around this at the moment, whereby we can extend some control and functionality to the user so they can see this information. So when these recommendations come back, we can display it in a couple of ways. We've shown it on screen as a complete UI where it shows all of the content in the EPG, irrespective of recommendations. But we can also show that in a collapsed view where the user can select something, and then they can also set up a reminder, and then they get a push notification on their phone to remind them that the show's about to start. Okay, so I mean, that finishes my implementation. Just another point on Ivor's question as well. One of the next things that Vodworks and Ncanto are embarking on is combining the linear broadcast content EPG as well as VOD content and trying to put it back into one home environment where everything's pushed and to the user. So you'll even see actually on the home screen we started work on this. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. You will see just directly below. We're recommending channels, and already we're recommending back now playing content to the user. And that is actually customizable, so it shows only recommended. So they have access to all content from one screen.
I also would like to show a couple of implementation examples before I go into the use case. And then I think we should be finished quite in time with our webinar as well. So this is, for example, an implementation one of our partners did in the German-speaking countries. It's an iPad app. And this is an example of how you can basically blend not only content types into a single view, but also content or different content types into a single view. So where you can go down, for example, here, the lower you go, the less obviously important the content becomes for you, but you have still a combination of, for example, documentation, which are the green colored tiles, movies, which are the blue colored tiles, and series, which are the mixture between sort of mint kind of colored tiles on this on this screen here. And you can always go into the system, for example, and say, I would like to now only see, for example, movies which are recommended to me, and then you have the same view, but just for movie content. Or you can also, here in this particular case, what Saqib said, for example, I only would like to see, recommendations which are more than 90% relevant to me, for example. So the user can play around here a little bit with this. But what we can also see, very similar to what Saqib said, is in EPG here, where you also have indicated, for example, with Bruce Perry, Abenteuer Amazonas, that this one is recommended to you and it fits your profile by 90%. And if you look at it, for example, you can also see what's on television at exactly the same time. And then you would also have indicated here when, for example, Babylon AD, which is coming from a VOD library, is recommended to you, or what is content relevant for me, which is only on this particular channel, for example. The second thing, and probably last thing I would like to show before we go into the use case, customer cases, there are also other ways of implementing recommendations. And just one simple example, for example, could be this VOD platform here in Austria, which have implemented the search function of Ncanto. And this shows also, if I, for example, search for something like winter, you will see on the screen basically that we can return more than just the results. We can also return, for example, some basic information where you see, for example, a kind of a figure for people, or you see a director's chair for the director, or we see a play button for a movie. So we can indicate for you as well, if what type of return can we give? Is it an actor? Is it a director? Is it a cast member? Is it a movie? Is it a series or something alike? And I think they have quite nicely implemented this here in the search to show you exactly what you're looking for and find it even quicker than before. Okay, so finally, to spend probably 2 or 3 minutes, I would like to have a very quick use case, customer case study presented and prepared for you. So what this is we were asked to make a proof of concept, a quite detailed proof of concept with one of our partners. And he wanted to include our Ncanto recommendation solution into an existing transactional VOD service platform. It had about 50,000 subscribers and about 5,000 assets on the platform. And so far, only editorial recommendations were served up to the customer, and 80% of the revenues coming in this platform were created by only 5% of the overall user base. So what we decided on to have a trial, and this is something you can always do with Ncanto, and which actually we would also encourage you, is that we can very quickly implement a trial. So this can be implemented within probably a couple of weeks. Even into existing user interfaces, we would define the use cases. And in this particular case, the customer wanted us to populate certain carousels or rows of the user interface with personal recommendations. And we decided on 3 out of 10 to be populated by recommendations. 1 was populated by the user preferences. So everything we learn about the user comes together there. And another one, we decided we wanted to have it populated by the 2 top criteria we know about the user. So for example, the 2 top genres or the 2 top actors or something like this. And a third one is we made best series recommendations. So the series where we think are best for this particular user, or if the user is new to us, then it's more a statistical recommendation observed up to him. And I think the result we achieved with this implementation did even exceed our expectations as well. So what we were able to do is we were able to, first of all, as I mentioned, only 5% of people were working, but we were able to increase the subscriber base who bought off the platform by an impressive 16%. And please bear in mind that all these numbers are actually coming out of a 3-month trial. So this is not an observation period of months and years. It's really within 3 months, these results have been achieved. The TVOD revenues then basically increased by a quite impressive 26% after 3 months, and an overall ARPU across all of the subscribers, we achieved more than 10%. It was, I think, about 10.5%. We were able to increase the overall ARPU across all of the subscribers from this particular customer. So if done correctly, we believe that content discovery and recommendation can make quite a difference to your service. And just to answer in one sentence John's question here, how long it takes to deploy our solution. So as I mentioned, this trial was done within just a few months. So it was a 4-month period while we had the first month implementation, then 3 months fine-tuning with business rules and a collaboration with the customer to make changes to increase those revenues. A typical implementation in an IPTV or cable or pay TV environment usually can be as quick as 3 to 4 months, where we didn't do the integration. So basically the integration was 2 months, and there was a trial period in between of 3 months, and the integration included VOD, linear TV, catch-up, so the full pay TV environment.
It's just worth mentioning, actually, Tom was talking about cable IPTV, which is a more complex environment. In an OTT, both myself and Tom, we have worked on an implementation together, and we've been able to deploy in weeks because our solutions are pre-integrated and we can take them to market fairly rapidly. So in an OTT environment, it can actually be achieved in potentially under a month, depending on scope and size of project.
So just as a conclusion, to state basically and summarize what we discussed today, what you should be looking at and looking for, particularly when you're looking into content discovery and recommendation, is that it serves the 3 key criteria we see we can improve for our customers and we deem most important for them is obviously to keep the total cost of ownership as low as possible, so that you find solution which quickly and easily adapts to the availability of the data you have. Sometimes you have more metadata available about content, sometimes you have more data available about users. So you need a solution which can deal with both, also in different use cases. That it's easy to connect to the platform, that you don't have to spend a lot of time and resources in connecting to it. And I think in the case with Vodworks, what we like in this partnership is that once it is pre-integrated into an end-to-end environment and you take this end-to-end environment on board, also the rollout of content discovery and recommendation becomes very, very quick and smooth. And I think finally, with respect to revenues, you need a solution that really has the capabilities to build a high level of trust of your audience with the service very, very quickly. If people start making interactions and they don't see any response, or they don't have any transparency in the services, they will not use your service for very long. But also make sure that the solution works across all different content types. So regardless if it's music, video, any other digital media, make sure that it is a future-proof service and that it also allows you to blend your business goals into the user tastes.
Actually, just in that subject, I know Vodworks obviously and Ncanto and slash Crossroad Media are working on a tool for targeted advertising. You know, driving that technology to deliver more and more immersive advertising where you get higher revenues and CPCs. But I mean, do you have any thoughts around that? I mean, based on your experience.
Ncanto, you know, by the nature of a content discovery solution, is used there as a decision engine to decide at the end of the day what kind of advertisement should be in front of what type of user. We do this today in two ways. One is with actual advertisement content, but the other way is also with personalized notifications, so that people get personalized emails or personalized text messages from the service provider to make them aware of content that's coming into a VOD library, for example, or content which is coming, which is broadcasted on television over the weekend, for example. What we do there is we hook up Ncanto to third-party tools like yourself, who provide us with the campaign information about advertisement. So we hook up into advertisement tools through standardized interfaces. And the campaign management and the advertisement asset management actually stays with our customer or with their trusted media agencies or third parties. And we really act as a decision engine, and we take the profiles we built from our interactions of entertainment content into the commercial world.
So I think what's quite interesting about that as well is, you know, I think this is a very exciting area. We have coming up in the future, you know, the whole targeted advertising market, I think, will change. And so, you know, I think this is, you know, it's a watch this space. I think one of the major problems that we're seeing, not so much in the Western markets from the deployments that we've done, but maybe more Asia, Africa, Latin America, is a lack of advertising stock. And I think what this could do is make it a little bit more exciting for advertisers, knowing that they're going to get more penetration, where they're advertising with tools like this, like the ones we're working on, and some examples of some of those implementations that you've already done.
Yeah, I would definitely vouch for that. What we see as well, in addition, is I think advertisers still need to go away to understand the power of targeted advertisement on a different medium like the web, for example. On the web, I think it's fairly established today. But in TV, people are still thinking about, you know, the CPMs and how much they can mass send out their advertisement rather than really targeting towards individual users. And I think you're completely right. In the APAC market, they have always been more advanced in advertisement. You see it also much more in second screen apps and these kind of things. But I think this will come over time. And there are some companies, and also I think more importantly for us in the ecosystem, some more advertisers who are now starting to explore this possibility. And I would definitely say to watch the space in the next 2 to 3 years to come.
Okay, so I think we can move into the Q&A session. So, I mean, if anyone has any questions to ask, please feel to drop them in now. While we're waiting for those questions to come in, I'm going to ask Tom a personal question from my perspective. Now, I know Vodworks and Ncanto are working on lots of wonderful solutions for the future and stuff, but what do you think is the future for this technology? Where do you think it's going to go?
You mean content discovery in general, or yeah? Well,
sorry, I didn't mean to give you a hard one.
Well, I think content discovery is starting now to get center stage in future services. So we see particularly the new rollout of services, OTT, are much more visually driven, for example, than menu driven as they were before.
Yeah.
So the real estate becomes even more scarce for showing more and more content. So I think the urge to get something on the screen which is relevant to the user in the first place is extremely important. And we see this with a lot of deployments today. I think the biggest challenge really is how to narrow down what you put on screen to just a number of assets. It's not like 10, 15, or 20 any longer. It is really 2 or 3 items. And if you don't grasp what the user is looking for in those 2 or 3 items, you might have lost him at least for this session, if not even longer. So I think content discovery will become more and more center stage to make sure that you can pick up the customer and then start a journey with him in the future to only navigate through relevant content for him. What I also believe is that lean back medium will become more important in content discovery and recommendation. We've seen a rollout of recommendation engines on the web, fairly successful, some more, some less, but we haven't seen them too much, and also particularly not very, very successfully on lean back medium. I mean, there is a clear reason for that, which is the lack of input mechanisms, because remote controls are let's say limited in their input mechanisms, and I'm not a strong believer in people talking to their remote controls or talking to their
like the Apple TV.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not a strong believer in that, but it will happen. But I don't think it's going to be mainstream very, very soon. So I think what will happen there is, how can you make automated playlists, for example, for the user, that they can, with just a few clicks, enter into the mood, into the category they're interested in, and then just leave the remote on the desk and be entertained for a long time to come without basically looking for the entertainment. So really automated playlists in a lean back environment.
So just to add to that, one of the things that myself and Tom have coined is, our future plans and some stuff that we're working on in labs at the moment include the idea of going from the old environment where, get user from point of entry to content with as few as possible clicks, is changing that scenario to getting the user from point of entry to content with 0 clicks. And so I think there's some very exciting things to do coming up from both companies in the next year. And we'll definitely be sure to reach out to you and communicate with you. If you have any questions or you have any innovative ideas that you would like us to potentially try and pull together a proof of concept on, please feel free to reach out. We're very, very quick at turning around these ideas.
What I would like to do as well, just on your last point, I think this is exactly why we have also developed a solution where you can provide personal recommendation from the very, very first interaction onwards, because people don't have the time, particularly in a lean back environment, to train the system for weeks, months, and years to come. They would like to see results straight away. So this is why we have narrowed down the training cycles from weeks to days, and now really to a single interaction. Yeah. And I think this is very, very important, what you just said before, for the lean back environment.
So yeah, just a final thank you. I would like to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon, this morning even, and a separate thank yous to Tom, who was kind enough to join us and spend some time talking about this subject area. And finally, just a thank you to Livestorm, who are the people who are providing this webinar tool, which seems, for the most part, except for our microphone mix-up at the beginning, has been quite successful. Okay, so that covers everything. Thank you very much, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Take care and have a lovely day.